Joe, I would like to ask you your thoughts on this deal, because there has been a lot of back and forth about how effective it will be in the long term in terms of deterring Iran from making a nuclear weapon. Foreign policy says the agreement failed to prevent Iran from continuing construction on its nuclear reactor at Iraq. Once that facility is operational, a key part of Iran's nuclear program would be immune to airstrikes because bombing the plant would lead to a deadly radiation leak. Your thoughts?
I think there's no question about it. Despite Mr. Netanyahu, this is a good deal. This will freeze Iran's program in place. Because of the croissant that the French threw into the gears over the weekend, Iran's program continues. We could have had a deal that would have stopped it, stopped the most critical parts of it, their enrichment of uranium to medium levels. That's the one. Remember when Netanyahu was at the UN last year and had that cartoon of the bomb and he drew the red line?
Yes, we do.
The deal is focusing on that supply of uranium, the one he said was his red line. Now, there are other issues like this Arak reactor, A-R-A-K,
yes,
reactor. This is a reactor that's going to come online at the end of next year. Then they'll put fuel in it, and after about a year of operation, some of that fuel will turn to plutonium. That's a possible source for another bomb, but Iran doesn't even have a reprocessing plant that could extract that plutonium. So it's a 3 or 4 year away problem. The problem with what the French are doing is they want to put that in this initial deal now, kind of overloading the cart. As a result, I think over the next 10 days, we're going to get a bigger initial deal than was originally thought, and that will require us to give a little more on sanctions than we might be comfortable doing. But I think we're going to get a deal. We are closing in on the finish line.
Ari, the statement by President Netanyahu did not do much to further the broader goal of getting a deal done, it would seem, especially if you're the White House. I think what is also notable is how much the relationship with Bibi and President Obama has atrophied. I mean, at this point, I believe that Kerry did not end up having a bilateral press conference because tensions were so high. This has always been a rocky relationship, but certainly this, I think, has exacerbated it.
Right. President Obama spoke with Netanyahu late last week, but as you say, from the very beginning of this presidency, there has been this very sort of chilly relationship between them that each one in public statements says is a very warm relationship. From day one, there have been road bumps. Every time there's an election, Republicans use this as a talking point that the U.S. is less pro-Israel than it's been in the past. The two men do not seem to get along very well, and this is just the latest point that we've seen that flare up in differences in policy.
We've also, other men who like to chime in, and I love the idea of the French throwing a croissant into the spokes. He is throwing his own version of a croissant into the spokes. He, meaning, by he, I'm of course referring to John McCain, who tweeted, France had the courage to prevent a bad nuclear agreement with Iran. Vive la France. Lindsey Graham tweets, thank God for France. And Bob Corker says that the Americans are dealing away our leverage. To some degree, Republican resistance to American foreign policy as written by President Obama is really no big surprise. That said, you know, in terms of the sanctions piece, they're going to need congressional approval to do anything on sanctions. And Congress has not been very obedient lately.
No, we're back to calling them French fries, I guess, instead of freedom fries. But no, on the Hill, there's a number of skeptical Democrats as well. But with the Republicans, they don't want to see a deal that is anything short of a full destruction of Iran's nuclear program. So it's going to be interesting to see if Kerry can go in and convince them this week to say, you know, give us more time. We'll be able to come up with something. But as you said, the skepticism runs really high.
Yeah, skepticism is deeply high. Ali, I want to ask you about, you know, expectations here. Joe seems fairly bullish, I think, fairly optimistic that something is going to happen. Some folks have reacted to Netanyahu's skepticism and said, listen, you're not going to get everything all at the same time. Just the fact that we got to the point that we were at this weekend is a very, very positive sign. You seem to echo that when we first spoke. So in terms of a timeline here, what are we looking at?
Hello?
I think we lost Ali Ruzi. We'll him back.
I can answer that.
Yeah, please do, Joe.
That he can correct me. You know, so it's very clear that the two main parties here, Iran and the United States, want a deal. You know, something very profound has happened with Iran. This is a new leadership. This is a strategic shift that we're seeing. This isn't a con game. They want out. They want to fix their economy. They want an end to the sanctions. They want to get reintegrated into the global architecture. And Kerry's praise the man to help make this happen. You can see how long they spent doing this. The foreign ministers of these 7 nations spent from 8 a.m. until 1 a.m. the following morning working on this. We've never seen this kind of involvement, of honest exchange. We've made more progress with Iran in the last 3 days than we have in the last 3 decades. That's why I'm looking at the underlying dynamics. This is going for a deal. All the nations were in agreement with the exception of France. France's considerations were then put into the new draft of the deal. Iran wasn't ready for that. They have to go back for instructions, but this is going to happen. I think they're going to reconvene on November 20th. I expect that will be where we'll see a deal completed there or very, very close. We have to be a little patient with the diplomacy, but this is the direction we're going in.
You know, Bill,